I'm Eric Clausen, the principal planner for the City of Lynn. Welcome tonight. Thank you for taking the time to join us on such a cold evening. I just want to note before we go any further, we do have live interpretation for folks who need assistance with Spanish. So if you don't have the equipment, let us know, raise your hand and we'll get it for you. All right, well, thanks again. Again, I'm Eric Clausen from the Planning Department of the City of Lynn. We're here to talk a little bit about some scenarios for redevelopment or potential redevelopment of the School Street parking lot, which is just on the other side of the commuter rail line here. So thank you for that. We want to present to you some ideas and get your feedback on the kinds of community benefits that you all might want with the redevelopment, and to consider the trade-offs that might need to be made in that decision making. Eventually, at some point in the future, we're going to take that and build what's called a request for proposals. It's part of the land disposition process for city-owned land. And the value of that process is it gives a lot of control to the community to decide how that development benefits you all. And you can decide on the benefits you might want, like affordable housing, which is a key component of this, like open space, or public parking, or other things that you want to be built into that project. Before I go any further, I just want to acknowledge that we have some city councilors here in the audience for us. Councilor Bato, Councilor Maggie Medry, and Councilor Alanson. Thank you for coming. And also Daniel Smith from the Mayor's Office is here joining us for this. All been a big part of this process. Why are we at this point tonight? Starting almost 4 years ago now, the city embarked on a housing plan in partnership with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Many of them here now, we'll introduce them in just a moment. Helped the city develop a housing strategy, housing plan called Housing Lynn, identifying both a need for affordable housing, more additional affordable housing throughout the community, the kind of affordable housing that we might want to build, and the kinds of programs to support access and equitable access to affordable housing. A number of policy recommendations came out of that process, and we've been able to successfully implement many of them, including an inclusionary zoning housing ordinance that requires affordable units with new housing production, and the creation of the Housing Trust, which provides funding and resources to create more affordable housing throughout the city. So those things have happened. One of the key recommendations coming out of that plan was to consider city-owned land for land disposition and utilizing that process to generate more affordable housing. Again, because that process gives us a lot of control on outcomes. And so that's why we're here. So once the plan was finished and adopted by the City Council in 2021, we started on this process with MAPC to look at the School Street parking lot as a redevelopment potential going through this disposition process. The city in the past has looked at its parking lots as redevelopment opportunities, so we targeted School Street at the time. We've been working through this process for almost 2 years now with MAPC, and a lot has changed, and I'm sure many of you are very aware of that dynamic. Just a couple things to point out. One, as you know, the MBTA garage was slated for demolition. At the very least, we know a couple floors are unavailable, so that affects the parking dynamic downtown. And then we also are embarking on a parking study for the downtown as well. So there's a many sort of programs and planning efforts that seek to inform this process. But we're at this point now where we want to share this information with you and get your feedback. So again, thank you. Look forward to sort of getting into it, and I'm going to stop talking so we can start learning a little bit more about this project. I'd like to introduce Alex Koppelman from MAPC, who's leading the project for us and can sort of take us into the next steps.
Hey, good evening everyone. My name is Alex Koppelman. I'm really excited to be with you tonight and to talk about this project. I also want to introduce my colleagues at MAPC, Sarai, Andrea, and Casey in the back, who is getting some soup ready if you're interested in that. But I'm going to actually turn it over to Sarai, who's also with the Lynn Affordable Housing Trust, to just make some opening remarks.
Hello everyone, so happy that you all could join us today on this cold night. My name is Sarai and I'm a public health planner at MAPC. I'm also on the Affordable Housing Trust. As a public health planner, I know the importance of affordable housing for our community's health and well-being, and really excited about this process to work collaboratively with you all to find the best method to move forward with this project, but also for it to be just a step in collaboration and hopefully be able to form partnerships to work on future projects. So thank you all, and I'll pass it back to Alex.
Thanks, Sarai. So just want to start by telling you a little bit about MAPC for those who may not be familiar. We're the regional planning agency. We serve 101 cities and towns in greater Boston, assisting communities to develop plans around housing, economic development, and many other things. And we were actually hired by the City of Lynn to create a housing plan to identify where is the housing need and what policies will best address that need. This was a 2.5-year-long process that involved a lot of community meetings like this and a lot of analysis. So tonight I'm not going to share with you a lot of data, but I am excited to talk more about this project as it is something that implements one of the key policy recommendations from the Housing Lynn Plan. The objective of this project is to collect community input to ensure the equitable redevelopment of the School Street parking lot, which we are located just nearby tonight, to create affordable housing opportunities in downtown Lynn. What you share with us is going to help the city determine what the priorities should be for that site, and it will also inform more engagement with a future development partner once that partner has been chosen. So this is still one of many points of contact with you, as we want this to be a community-driven process. I don't think it's any secret to anyone in the room that we have a major housing crisis that we've been living through for many years. That has only gotten worse by the pandemic. But we should know, for every 5 households in Lynn that are eligible for affordable housing, there is only 1 affordable housing unit. It's not just affordable housing, it's affordable housing that Lynn residents can actually access. 30% of the households in Lynn that are eligible for affordable housing, they need deeply affordable housing. So for individuals that make $31,000 or less. So 30% of eligible households need deeply affordable housing.
Excuse me? So could you just say, what do you mean by deeply affordable? I saw that.
That's a great question. So there's more information about that on the board in the back. But to put it plainly, there are different levels of affordable housing that different households can access. We have organized it as moderately affordable, so this would be roughly an individual making around $75,000 to $80,000. That would be moderately affordable, but it will cost no more than 30% of that household's income. But if you make less than that, you can't access that housing. So then what we're talking about as very affordable housing would be units that those who are around $50,000 annual income would be able to access. And then deeply affordable housing would be roughly folks making around $30,000 or less would be able to access. in all cases, the affordable housing will cost 30% of that household's income. More info on that in the back. So a lot of this data and analysis was included in the Housing Lynn Plan, which then established goals that focus on creating more deeply affordable housing and creating community benefits that actually serve Lynn residents. And from these goals, there were policies that were recommended, and one of the key policies was to use city resources, including publicly owned land, to create affordable housing that Lynn residents can access, and that also produces community benefits like parks and different things that the community needs that we'll be talking about more tonight. So just to give you some context on the site, we're located just south of it across the commuter rail track. So you can see we're here, and then that yellow outline is the site located in the central business district.
So you're included, or maybe you're going to say.
Yeah, this might be helpful. This is an aerial photo of the site. You can see there's a west side, it's a parking lot. The west side of the parking lot, there's kind of a dividing cul-de-sac here, and then the east side of the parking lot.
And you're talking about the east side only?
We're talking about both, but we're going to be talking about them a little differently, as we'll get into in a moment.
So are you suggesting that the ultimate goal would be to eliminate all of that parking? Ellis Street and School Street?
We're going to talk more about this, but the scenarios we've come up with that we're going to be asking for input on retain a third of the site for public parking. And based on what we hear from you all, maybe it's more, maybe it's less. But public parking is included in the proposed scenarios.
That lot is full, sir. If you build on there, where are we to go? There's no place to park. Like the snow emergency we had, where do people park? Where they would normally, it's so overgrown with so many people, so many vehicles. It did put a strain, and it does.
Yeah, I hear your concern, and that's a good one to raise. And you can see from this photo that the west side of the site, this photo was taken this morning, is full of cars. The east side of the site actually does not have any cars, and we're going to talk about how this would play out in a development scenario. We should also keep in mind that the city has hired Stantec to do a parking study and analysis because the city understands that that is a big need as well as housing, and we need to be thinking about that as well. So this may look familiar if you use the interim Lynn commuter rail station recently, as the west side of the site is currently being used for a temporary commuter rail platform. So let's talk about that a little bit more. A little bit of history about this project and the site. In the spring of 2021, the City Council voted to adopt the Housing Lynn Plan that we talked about earlier. And then shortly afterwards, this site was identified as a potential affordable housing opportunity because it's owned by the city. And so the city has a lot of control and leverage over what happens. In 2022, we hosted a forum to think about a vision for the redevelopment of the site. But then in the fall of 2022, the Lynn commuter rail station was closed for renovations, and this site was identified to serve as a temporary platform for the commuter rail. So moving forward, Redevelopment of the site would be considered in 2 phases. So first, you'd be looking at the potential redevelopment of the east side of the site, which we saw in the photo earlier, doesn't seem to be as utilized as much for parking currently, and is not really affected by the interim commuter rail station. So proposals for potential redevelopment of this side of the site may go out, a request for these proposals from potential development partners may go out sometime later this year, with then potential construction occurring shortly after that. Redevelopment of the west side of the site would not be considered until the interim commuter rail station is decommissioned and taken down, and the permanent commuter rail station is reopened. That's expected to happen somewhere near 2030, so pretty far off in the future. Any questions about that?
Yes, sir. Please, you are impacting businesses like Simmons that are on. We want people to come here. You know, the young man spoke about the $200 of easy access income you want people to spend every week if they had it. Businesses are being impacted by not having spaces for people to park to come to access their businesses. Sorry.
That's important to think about as well, because yes, there's all of these businesses on Union Street that may be affected by changes in parking supply. So certainly you need to keep that in mind.
Is that then considered as part of the MBTA zoning, or is it owned by the city?
This lot is owned by the city, but Aaron, you want to say more?
I'll just repeat the question. So the question, if I have it right, sir, was whether or not the site is affected by the MBTA zoning requirements?
Yeah.
Okay. So the short answer is no. And just a little background, the state created regulations for communities that have service from the MBTA, whether it's commuter rail, rapid transit, or bus service. And if you're a community served by the MBTA, you have to create a zoning district that allows a certain density of multifamily housing by right within that district. There's a lot of rules and regulations built around that that differ based on the particular city and its context. The city of Lynn already meets, in our view, already meets the requirements. We've submitted our interpretation and submitted our analysis for their review. So basically, we don't need to create a new district to meet the requirements. We already do so.
But would that consider as well that as we fight right now, that to get some of the land from their MBTA zoning so we can build affordable housing? So can we tie that within them too?
Yeah, they're different issues, basically. The question was, can you tie the fact that the MBTA commuter station is right there on site with the fact that the city owns the property and benefit from that connection? They're separate. They don't impact each other one way or the other. Yeah.
Is the parking spot behind the CVS pharmacy or the old CVS pharmacy, is that going to be a part of this plan at all?
No, that's a different, that's a privately owned parking lot. The question was the parking lot behind the old CVS pharmacy, is that under consideration? That's to the south and east of the School Street lot, so that's a privately owned lot.
Given that this is a public hearing of sorts and you're trying to get public input, I'm just curious, is there a possibility that the public's opinion of building on both sites would be a bad idea, would it ever have a chance of succeeding?
Yeah, let me just repeat your question and make sure I understand it correctly. Your question is whether or not
our input matters.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. As Alex said earlier, the intention of this meeting is to gather input on the community benefits that could happen with the redevelopment. And given a lot of the issues we've heard today, relative to changing dynamic parking, the commuter rail station, the concern about supporting local businesses a block away, a decision may be made to not redevelop the site. This isn't the last word. This is an opportunity to give us feedback that we can incorporate into a possible request for proposals. There will be additional opportunity to provide feedback. And before anything can happen on the site, it has to go to the city council to develop that RFP and put it out formally. So there's a lot of opportunity to go forward.
A lot of opportunity to make noise, but can we really make a difference?
Absolutely.
We can actually impact the decision making.
Yes.
We can.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I have a thought. What are we going to do with the empty space created by the MBTA garage being torn down? What's going to go there?
We don't know yet,
Well, why isn't that part of this discussion?
because the city doesn't own it.
So maybe you should wait until that's decided, because basically you're giving up an awful lot of parking for a very good cause, I grant you that, but the idea that you're going to wait and see what the MBTA decides to do with that property before you decide whether it's going to help solve the overall problem here, it's kind of foolish. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. So I'm going to just repeat your comment so everybody heard it. So the comment was basically, sorry, I'm paraphrasing and
That's
shorting
okay,
it a
no,
little
that's fine.
The city should consider all these different variables before we make an action on this site. One of them, an important one, I think in your view, is the fact that the commuter rail garage, the MBTA garage, may or may not be there for very long. And we don't know yet, from the T's perspective, what they're going to do with that site. And that's a fair comment, and I think the point Alex made earlier is that we're working with a consulting firm that specializes in public parking analyses. We just started that process to understand that very issue and understand how can we balance and manage our parking system to support everything that goes on in our downtown, small business, larger business institutions, and housing. So that will be part of the decision-making process, absolutely. And I'll just note, we just started that process in the last month or so. We are planning to have the first meeting on that process in February. I believe it's February 7th. So that's another opportunity to weigh on a similar interconnected issue.
So without trying to overtake this meeting, I'm sorry, I have just one more question. So this building that we're in right now was taken by eminent domain by the city of Lynn. Why can't the city of Lynn take that MBTA property by eminent domain?
Well, it's a question of cost, right? It's a 5-acre site that has a lot of expense to either repair or remove the garage. So there's
Got the housing trust fund, we got all that money in there. Use that. Anyway, I'm
you
done.
and I can talk offline about that, but there's a very different dynamic between buying a 900 space parking garage and in this facility. So, but I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I think what we will be doing going forward is tonight, and I appreciate all these questions and comments, when we have the breakout and we talk about these different variables, please make sure all the concerns, comments, and ideas that you have for the site, even if it is keep it the same, that needs to be part of the feedback that helps us think through both an RFP for the site for land disposition or not to do that. And we want to make sure that you're engaged with us going forward with this process, with the parking plan, and others as they come up.
I've got a couple of points, just picking up where he left off. If the MBTA is going to knock it down, that was what you told me once, and reconfigure it maybe with fewer parking spaces, they still have to go through the city and planning departments, et cetera, and get permits. Well, what if some of those caveats were X number of parking spaces? I'm just throwing that out. Now, I know how you feel about parking on the first level of buildings, but in this site, I'm just wondering if there's some way to have some commercial frontage, but some on-site parking too, to take up the first floor. And some of the residents, because of where they are going to be considered transit-oriented zip car types, mass transit types. So the residents in the building might not necessarily need vehicles for their own parking spaces. So this is a place where, just supplementing a tit for tat would be incorporated in the first levels of these buildings, still leaving a little bit for commercial frontage or the art galleries.
Yes, that's possible. I'll just repeat your comment for everybody's benefit. So the comment was primarily around the School Street site. There may be an ability to redevelop it so that the new building, the new structure could include on-site parking for both the new residents or public parking, could include retail or other uses to activate the street, create job opportunities, and that sort of thing. That's the kind of
zone that way, wasn't
and
it?
you could zone it that
The zoning that happened on his watch was
Right.
making sure there's commercial space, just to keep the downtown dynamic. And just to follow up on this Smith Street, I just was driving over here and I took a look at the wonderful drone footage that you put on the blurb site. But that has some old growth trees, and it's a charming little enclave. And if this new project were to front on that side, I just see it a pedestrian promenade with maybe some outdoor al fresco dining, things like that, to keep that pedestrian promenade. It's already kind of got that character. I'm hoping you'll continue that.
Okay, Calvin, great thought. Keep that for the breakout session. This is the perfect kind of topic for the breakout. So yes.
I figured you'd like that.
Why don't we wrap up the presentation, because I think you have a lot of great comments and concerns that you want to raise. Let's do that as soon as we can. So Alex, you want to finish the presentation?
Yeah, so great ideas and thoughts that have been expressed so far. We hope to have a lot more of that when we break out into the smaller group discussion so we can really talk through things. I'm going to go through the next couple of slides fairly quickly in the interest of time. But I wanted to note that the last engagements around the site were to develop a community vision, and that input has been considered in some of the proposals and ideas that you're going to weigh in on tonight. But again, your input tonight could change things. But what we've heard from the public so far is that there's a desire to use this city asset to get the deepest amount of affordability in our affordable housing, the most amount of affordable housing. But parking has emerged as the other big benefit that the community thinks is important to have through the site. So that culminated in a vision statement. It's here. We can share that with you as a follow-up, but I'm going to move on in the interest of time. There are 3 redevelopment scenarios that you'll have an opportunity to see in the breakout sessions and tell us what you think. We're asking you which of these potential scenarios you like best, and if there's a different scenario or a different outcome that you may like to see as well. And we're going to ask you about other benefits that you'd like to see come from the site, as housing should always serve the neighborhood and not just be housing for housing's sake, but benefit the community and create a neighborhood. So we're also going to ask you about other community benefits you think are important. Part of the way the city is going to move forward in evaluating different proposals is to score them based on how equitable that they are. So I'm going to hand it over to Andrea Harris with MAPC to just talk to you a little bit more about what that means.
And I think for the sake of time, I will talk more about this at our stations, because at all of our stations we're expanding on all of this content a bit more. So for the sake of time, I'll spare this slideshow, but know that we'll get more into what equitable development means, the opportunities for that to happen on the site, and how you want to continue to be involved as the site is kind of going through the city process, and then ultimately, working with development partners so that the community can have points in all of those processes. Thanks.
Following the presentation, residents moved to breakout sessions, where they were given a worksheet asking how they would like to be involved in the process moving forward. Some examples were a special committee, additional forums, or surveys. Participants were also given the chance to place poker chips in jars to signal what they believe are the most important aspects in this new proposed 5 to 6 story building. Each element required varying levels of chips, depending on the amount of resources they would take to construct. Deeply affordable housing for those earning $30,000 or less per year was the overwhelming winner, with parking spaces coming in second. Next steps are the City and MACP drafting RFP criteria, an equity development scorecard, and a framework for evaluating development proposals.
But we also want to hear, how do you want to be engaged? Once the kind of proposal is solidified and the city has decided we're going to proceed with this action and hire a development partner, there's another opportunity for community to be involved, and that's with the development partner. And so we also would love to hear how you might want to work with a potential developer or development team, and that can be included in the request for proposals.
For LCTV News, I'm Danny Vittori.